Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 107 called Creating a Jazz Culture with Chris Behrens from Beloit High School. Chris and I came across one of Chris's comments on one of the Facebook posts that I put out there about great jazz repertoire. And I knew Chris and I were kindred spirits when I heard that he wrote, I believe if you're going to teach students jazz swing in a Latin tradition, they need to hear this music right from the beginning with an emphasis on hear. And he says our jazz program starts with students playing and hearing charts based upon real jazz recordings. So when you said that, I was like, all right, I got to find out about this guy. And then when I saw you were at Beloit High School, I was like, I've seen them for the Essentially Ellington thing like forever. And so excited to be connected with you. Thanks for checking in with us today, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
So let's talk about that to start. Like why they have to hear first, right from the beginning.
Well, I want to go back just one step before we talk about that. What's the end goal? Why are we doing this? And we're not here trying to create jazz musicians. If that happens, that's great. They go on and play professionally or whatever. But I do want them to hopefully appreciate this music and go out and keep listening to it and supporting it, because as we know, it's not popular music anymore. And I am still a gigging musician. I still play 4 times a month at least as a pianist in a quartet and a big band. And if you look at our audiences, they are on the older side. And
Sure.
If we want this music to survive, we need to make sure that our students are appreciating this music. So there's lots of jazz repertoire out there for our bands to play. And I have nothing against composers writing new stuff and playing that third version of the Flaming Burrito or whatever it is. I'd rather them listen to or play in a mellotone or something. A great jazz standard. By Mark Taylor for the younger band, or maybe the version that Frank Foster wrote for the Count Basie band, or even the original version that Duke did for his group. And then we could start out by listening to the Oscar Peterson trio playing it, with Ed Thigpen on drums. And that's my philosophy. There's just so much and so many tunes and good arrangements of them for younger bands and developing high school bands and even middle school bands, and of course your upper bands too. Why not play jazz standards and repertoire that's going to represent what this music is, and mix in some originals too and some contemporary things as well along the way. But the major focus of what we do is on the standards.
And I just wanted to mention real quick, we do have coming up, Terry White and I are going to sit down and do I think 6-part series. We have about 50 charts that are from beginning jazz band all the way up into grade 3 that people suggested and Terry and I like. And we're going to do score and sound on all those and share those out. That'll be coming this fall for people, some of which you suggested as well.
Yes.
I did want to, before we kind of get into it, how is your program set up with not just the jazz program, but other things you do at Beloit as well?
School District of Beloit, right now we're 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 high school. I think we're about 6,000 students in the district. And the high school is 1,400 students. We just reconfigured. It's a long story. I won't get into all that, but we're back to a K5, 6-8, and 9-12 district. And the band program itself at the high school, we have 2 concert bands and 2 jazz bands that meet during the day every day. And we're on a 5-block schedule. Very different from when I started. We were on an A-B block, 90-minute rehearsals every other day for the concert bands. Jazz was outside the school day, 1 night a week. A lot of support from administration and getting that changed so that music meets every day.
That's awesome. That's great. How did you do that? What went into that?
Um, well, I mean, it took a long time. I've been at the high school now since 2001, and I started in the district in 95, 96. So I don't know. I think this is my 28th year or something like that. I've lost track, but in steps. So, like I said, one night a week. We added 2 mornings. We just had one band. I'm talking about jazz specifically right now,
Sure.
but I think the first time we went to Essential Ellington, we still had that schedule. And then after we made it, I think our second time, I was like, we really need to get this offered as a class, and it should be. I mean, jazz, this is America's original music. Why isn't this taught as a class? Kids should receive credit for this just as they do anything else, So I just did a course proposal and, worked with administration to get that through. And that, a course proposal here takes like 18 months or something. So it's nothing's fast, but eventually got the first band to meet as a skinny opposite of a block, opposite of lunch, I think. And then got that to be a full block class that meets every day. And then got our second band in, I think on the skinny. And then now they're a full block class that meets every day. And so nothing's outside of school anymore, but it literally took 15 years, I think.
So kids,
but it's come off of the success of the program. I mean, they see what's
Sure.
going on, and
so kids have a concert band class and they have a jazz band class.
yeah. So the way our top ensemble, the wind ensemble, meets opposite of lunch, and that's also the time when everyone else has what's called academic lab. It's basically it's more than a study hall. They're doing some other things in there, 7 mindsets, career planning, that kind of thing. So everyone else in the school has lunch in that class. And then if you are in band or choir or orchestra, you have a music class. So they're not missing anything by taking wind ensemble, but then they can also take jazz as a class.
So when we were talking, we're talking about creating a successful jazz culture within the school program. So I guess my first question is, when you mean a jazz culture, what goes into that?
I was thinking about that because I knew you were going to ask me that question. What do I mean by that? So I think it's what I envision that when I say that, I think it's a community of people. And I'm talking about, all the stakeholders in that, the students, the teachers, the people you bring in as clinicians, guest artists. They have a passion for jazz, and it's their willingness to collaborate and share their knowledge and experiences with others. And I believe it all has to happen in an environment where you are encouraged to take chances and be creative. And there has to be a mutual respect and love for one another. It has to be a safe place.
So what are some ways you can get that safe place for them to take those chances? Is that just how you build your relationship with them from the first day they're there?
Yeah. I mean, it starts with you, the director, getting to know your students, obviously. I mean, that's something we all do for any class. And, as far as the jazz part, I think, students know that this is a passion of mine. They hear me playing. I play piano, and we have piano in the room. I get out my saxophone from time to time, although I'm not very good at it, but I still do it. Play in front of them, I'll improvise right along with them. Performing, I want to touch on this too. I think that informs our teaching. And I think it's really important that as music educators that we all keep performing and make that part of our career. And I'll give you an example, why. I mean, it just came up a couple of months ago. I had a student come to me. He said, I feel like I'm playing the same stuff when I'm improvising, and how do I get past this? what can I do? And I said, I'm going through the same thing you are. Let's sit down and let's talk about how I've been doing that, and I can kind of share some things. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if I hadn't been going through that myself, I might not be able to answer that question. So, I think performing and playing is an important thing. Beyond that, having students understand that when you're improvising, you're out there taking a chance, and you're exposing yourself to making mistakes, and it's not ever going to be perfect, and you're going to make you're going to make lots of mistakes when you first try doing this stuff. Everyone has to remember that no matter what level you are, we all started at the ground zero, and you need to there needs to be that support for one another.
What approach do you take when you're teaching jazz improvisation? Like
So,
on a big picture level.
big picture level. So yeah, first of all, I try to do it daily. I think that's really important because just like anything else, you want to get good at it. You gotta do it as much as possible. So, but when we do improvisation, even with the older group, we're gonna do it as a group first. And that means everyone's doing it at one time, all together, and it sounds like chaos. If an administrator walked in or somebody walked in off the street, be like, "What is this nonsense?" I thought you guys were supposed to be good, but it's gonna sound terrible. But that allows people to work on stuff. They're not being self-conscious of what they're playing, or some of my neighbor listening to me or whatever. But everyone's playing. So the group improvisation all at one time, and then after that we'll ask for volunteers, and then there'll be some days where we're just going to go, hey, we're going to go down the road, and everyone's going to play two measures maybe, or just one measure to start with, or four measures, and pretty soon you have people volunteering to play. Hey, I want to do a solo today, and sometimes it's the same people all the time, so you have to make sure you get to the ones that are trying to avoid raising their hand, or
and encouraging especially, I mean, I think once they reach a certain threshold, a student level, you can then be pretty critical of what they're playing. But I've always found success, especially with the younger improvisers, like whatever they're playing, I'm happy they're playing, and finding a way to give them some advice and some things to keep doing. But like the last thing I would ever do is if a kid played alone is to them criticize them in front of their friends with what they played.
Yeah.
That's a way to like kill an improviser.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what they play. The first things that they play, it's always, that sounded awesome. And you find whatever it is that they're doing, something that they did, and give them some positive feedback, and go from there.
Okay, so let's dig into a little bit. How do you listen to recordings with your band?
First off, I provide a YouTube playlist of everything that we do in the big band. So there'll be the original big band arrangement, if we can find it. Most of the time, that's pretty readily available. Then I also, especially for the younger band, I'll put in the versions of some other versions of that same tune, whether it's a quartet arrangement or a vocal arrangement of it. And so at least a couple times a week, we'll start a class by pulling out one of those songs on the list and listening to it, sitting down, and I'll ask them very directed questions like, what is the rhythm section doing here? What specifically do you hear the drummer doing with his left hand? What do you hear him doing with his right hand? How long are the quarter notes that the bass player is playing? What do you hear the piano player doing behind the soloist? How often do you hear them playing? We'll talk about the solos. How's the solo structured? Is there a high point? How does it start? How does it end?
Mm-hmm.
But just getting to listen to, the intricacies of what's all going on. And so, I mean, there's so much going on. You could spend a whole time just listening to one of those things for the entire track. And just getting them to realize that, when you sit down, when I say listen to something, you got to be very direct, and it has to be a concentrated listening, not listen to the background while you do your homework.
Sure.
Kind of thing. So just teaching them how to listen. But we also might, hear something that we'd like in a solo and say, hey, let's transcribe this short idea. And then we'll use that in a warm up and maybe learn to play it in a few keys, something like that.
Do you try to copy recordings with your kids? Like, do you try to take recordings and get your kids to sound precisely like the original Ellington band?
The Ellington thing's it's a kind of a different animal, I guess. It depends on what we're talking about, what the use of it is for. Are we talking about using it to try to get into the Essential Ellington competition? I think there's a lot of value in trying to copy what his players did. Learning how to play inflections, learning how to scoop, learning how to play vibrato, all those different things that make jazz sound the way it does. So yes, we are trying to copy that, but we always want to put our own spin on the music and make it sound like Beloit.
When we're talking about improvisation, I've heard of two main ways to teach improvisation. One is by harmony, scalars, scalar and chords and all that stuff, the Jamie Aebersold approach. And I've also know a lot of people who teach it melodically, where they learn the melody and they improvise on the notes of the melody. I'm a strong believer that there's a place for both. What do you do when you first start kids out, and how do you use those two methods?
So, with the younger bands, and we're talking, ninth graders, for me, they're coming in with some limited experience in improvising. We have, middle school that meets a couple times a week. I'm approaching it like they're starting from square one, just to cover all the bases. So, I'd like to start with the blues, just because it's short form. It's what our music, jazz, is based upon, and it's important that everyone is able to solo on the blues. So that's where we start. We'll start by learning some really simple riffs by ear. I like to kind of stick to one key, like either B flat or F. I think I lean more towards B flat just because of the range. But we'll learn a whole bunch of different heads in B flat, starting with riffs that are the same, three phrases, repeated riffs, and then like an AAB riff. The first two phrases are the same, and then a contrasting third one. So, for example, an obvious one, the ones that are the same, CJM Blues is the same riff 3 times, right?
Yep.
And then a AAB riff would be Red's Good Groove,
Mm-hmm.
I believe is an AAB. So, I mean, just looking at some of those simple things, and then, and what you're doing by doing that is you're starting to develop some language. I mean, once you've learned those riffs and those heads, how can you take those and make subtle changes to them and use them as language?
Do you use call and response or call and copy?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Call and copy, call and response. And there's also a really good resource. I have it actually right here, but this book right here by Dan Greenblatt is great. The Blues Scales, Essential Tools for Jazz Improvisation. It's Shure Music Company.
Okay.
And what's in here that I really like is, so he breaks down the blues scale. There's a major blues scale and a minor blues scale. But what's really cool in here is he's got some short, like 1 or 2 measure ideas for like major blues scale vocabulary, and then minor blues scale vocabulary, and how to use that over a blues and where to use that.
Mm-hmm.
And so by just like learning by ear some of these phrases, it's another step further than just learning a riff from a tune that you can use when you solo. So, and what I'd like to do once students can have once they've a few of these under their fingers, and they have I give them like the whole few pages of these. I tell them to compose a blues, like actually sit down and write one out, and then we go around and have everyone play them, and it gives them a little more confidence, like, hey, this sounds good. Yeah, I was able to make something that sounds good, and you can use this stuff, and pretty soon you start hearing them start to use these ideas when they improvise. And improvisation is not just making stuff up completely from scratch. I mean, it's and we all know this, but it's speaking a language. We all have vocabulary, so we're just developing vocabulary, and that's what this is.
And the more they listen as well, that whole process, that helps with their vocabulary too. And it's funny,
Absolutely.
like the more kids listen, they'll start playing, and then they'll start playing licks that they listen to, but they never practiced. They start coming as part of their vocabulary. I thought that was the coolest thing when I was growing up.
Right. Another step I want to mention too is that I like to put everything to numbers. If you hear something like let's 6868 do da da do da do da, right? Just that simple riff. Whatever it is that we're playing, I like to have put a number to that so that it's easily transposed to another key. There's also another good resource I like to use. It's called the Jazz Lictionary. You can find this online. It's a PDF you can download, but it's got all these licks and numbers. And, once we're really good with the major scales, as part of our warm up, we'll, let's pick a lick and we'll run that through all 12 keys, just by writing the numbers up on the board. So,
I'll do a lot of that. I'll do a lot of that in jazz band, but I'll do that in wind ensemble concert band too.
Oh,
We'll
yeah,
do,
sure.
go around the circle with, I think numbers are great.
Right. I used to be a big, or at least when I started this whole thing, back when I was in high school, modes, do re mode, mixolydian mode, all these modes, but it's just really the major scale and altering certain pitches, right? I mean, I don't know. It just makes it's just so much easier to wrap your head around it. And then, later on, if you want to know that's a Dorian mode, that's great. But it just makes so much sense to use numbers.
I'd agree with you. You mentioned, you started alluding to that you would use some of these warm-ups as part of your warm-up. So I guess I would ask, what does your warm-up with your band look like? And is it different between your top band and your second band? Obviously, what they can do is more. They can do more.
Yeah, yeah. But we all start the same way. We use circle of fourths. Okay. I mean, you've already used circle of fifths going backwards, however you want to, some people don't like the circle of fourths whole idea, but I call it the circle of fourths just because it makes sense. When you move from in fourths, it's the same as, using a 2-5-1 and whatever. But
sure.
In the band world, that it just makes more sense. So we go around the circle of fourths, we play long tones. To start with, eventually I'll have the saxophones, and this is for the younger group and the older group, but I'll have them work on the vibrato as a section while we're doing that. Brass could also do a lip slur pattern on each one of those notes, or just, a couple notes, lip slur on each one of the circle notes. But we'll use that just as a long tone warm up, basically, in a couple different ways, as I described. Following that, we will then play some kind of scale pattern. At the beginning of the year, we might just do 1 2 3 2 1 2 3 2 1. Just because a lot of the kids have not played all 12 major scales. Okay, I mean, they're going to know some, but they certainly don't know them all. Now, if they were in the band the previous year, they certainly know all 12. We'll learn all 12 before the end of the first semester as a band. But we'll go from there, 3 notes, 5 note scales. The upper ensemble, the top group is doing stuff like, major scales up, down the major arpeggio, or a scale up with a flat 7 down the arpeggio, or maybe they're going up an arpeggio 3-5 flat 7-9 and then down the bebop scale from there. I mean, it's a whole bunch of variations.
Yep.
But again, it comes back to, you got to know the major scale, and then from there you can do lots of things. So we'll do a scale, and then we'll do some kind of pattern, like I described before, with a number, like some kind of vocabulary, just around the circle, and then from there, I'd like to do some kind of ear training, whether it be, we're going to listen to something today, or we're going to do some calm response using the blues, or we're going to do some actual, transcribe something, a short little segment of a solo, or, some kind of ear training every day, 10 minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes. No, I've got 75-minute rehearsals. So these are
sure, a
luxury, I guess. But even if you didn't, I would say the ear training stuff should, still try to do that. I think it's really that important.
One thing I thought of as you're speaking through those is, I have my kids learn the major scales in a similar way. They might we might start all the way at 1, and then 1 2 1, and then 1 2 3. But however you build it, when you do it that way, they're learning all the scales at the same time, rather than saying we're going to get to D flat next week. They're learning every scale at the same time, and before you know it, after a semester or year, or however long it takes you, the kids know all of them. And I love hearing that approach, because I've been doing that for a while, and it's nice to hear that you're doing it too.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add to that is, I mean, even if you have more advanced students in the band, you can have, freshmen, you guys are new to this. If you can't play the whole scale, like maybe the sophomores can, you guys can just play the long tone on this scale, like on G flat and B and E, while everyone else is playing. I mean, that's okay. You're going to learn it. but today you don't know it. So, or maybe you're just going to play 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, or one to up to five and back. So you can have those variations.
And
And
I delineate in my teaching the difference as well. We haven't talked about this, but the difference between call and copy and call and response. Because to me, when it's call and copy, they're literally trying to play exactly what I play. They're transcribing in the moment what I'm playing. But call and copy is, call and response is then they have some sort of response to what I'm playing. So it could be similar, but not the same.
we also do a rhythmic part of the warm up where I'll use a rhythm sheet that it'll just be like 1 or 2 lines off of it, a rehearsal, but we'll talk about how to sing the rhythm using the correct articulations, and we'll have them write in the articulations. So just to help them with, when we start looking at things in literature, getting them to articulate and to say the correct articulations goes a long way in getting them to sound right as an ensemble. And to do some of that work, up front makes it a lot easier.
That's great. Love it. All right, let's talk about the performance schedule you guys keep throughout the year. What do you do for gigs and what's steady and all that?
We used to, like everybody else, I'm sure, do a couple of concerts in the school auditorium. But we just got to a point, especially with the amount of rehearsal time that we have, where only doing a couple concerts a year is not enough for us.
And it motivates them when they have more coming.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, performing is these, students want to get out and perform. I don't know how it is everywhere else, but I'm assuming it's the same. If a performance is exciting, getting out and playing is fun. And so that's what we try to do a lot of. So what we did, because we have a very active theater. We have a civic theater that uses our stage adjacent to our main stage. We have an orchestra and a choir and other people that use the theater. It was hard to do more than our normal, 2-3 concerts a year. So we looked for a venue off-site, and we found a restaurant downtown that allows us to come in there basically anytime during the week. So we chose the third Wednesday of the month, and we have a regular gig at this place called the Grand Avenue Pub from 6 to 8 on the third Wednesday of the month. And starting in September with the first band, they'll be on their own, but then October, November, December. We don't do it in January and February because it's with essentially Ellington recording and our festivals and then the musical. There's a lot going on, so we don't go off site on those 2 months. But then March, April, and May, we are at this venue, and that allows us to play 8 to 10 tunes each band. Most of the time, I'd say 80% of the tunes are brand new from the last month, and parents come out, friends, family, and we literally pack the joint. I mean, they have a stage, a sound system, decent lighting. We have to bring our own chairs so that we don't use up chairs from the restaurant. So it's great, and the kids, we all look forward to it. It's so much fun. And
yeah,
it's an intimate environment and authentic. This music, it should be played in Carnegie Hall, but it wasn't originally. It was played in small places like this, and it's great to be able to do that.
And I think it's great. A lot of people would say, well, learning that much music that quickly. Obviously, you have the class every day, which is great. But the concept of there's basically gigs year round. Now, I can speak to my program. We have gigs starting end of August, and it goes into June. We're basically gigging or doing festivals or whatever all year long. Because to me, even if we're playing a little bit less at each one, the consistent playing throughout the year, it's hard to swing when you've only got 3 months out of the 12.
Right. Yeah. We don't really take a break. We're a year-round program. We obviously do festivals all over the Midwest, and the competitions and results from that are great, but certainly not the important thing. I think it's really important though for students to get out and hear other bands and see what they're doing, and then meet other students. We've done some really, I think, cool things these last few years and prior to COVID. But last year, we did an exchange concert, I guess I'll call it that, Noblesville, Indiana, with Bethany Robinson, and on our way down to Purdue University, we played a concert together at I think it was a bowling alley that had a separate banquet room, and we set up a stage, and they brought the rhythm section equipment, and we had pizza together. And it was done. We had a jam session. Kids could go bowl if they wanted, but they hung out together for 3 hours, and then we went to the festival the next day at Purdue, and we've done the same thing with John Curry down at Champaign, Illinois, and it's just, I mean, the kids talk about this. They talk, and they still talk about it. Those kinds of things all the time, and just meeting other people that do the same thing that they are and that are passionate about this music is, I think, really, really important.
And what's great about those is you can just set those up as a director, another director that and make it happen. That sounds awesome. The bowling alley is like the place to be, it sounds like.
Yeah. And then one more thing with travel, we do a trip every other year to New Orleans, which I think, I really believe in creating authentic experiences for the students. And what's more authentic than, talking about the beginnings of jazz while sitting in Congo Square down in New Orleans, or walking around the French Quarter, hearing the music or eating the food, and, just the vibe of New Orleans. So, and I'm happy to share itineraries with anybody who wants to see those or talk to me about those trips, but they are, life-changing. And, this goes back to what I said at the beginning, I'm here to hopefully have students appreciate and love this music so they go out and continue to do that after high school.
So let's talk a little bit about the summer program that you do.
A couple of years ago, I started teaching a summer improvisation course, 2 or 3 days a week. And it's not for credit, just, a couple handful of kids will show up for that in the morning, 2 hours a day. And that's been really valuable, I think, as far as getting kids to kind of dig in a little bit more into improvisation and feel more comfortable with it. We started having a weekly jam session at a local ice cream shop here in town every Monday night from 6 to 8. We're out there. And that's just, whoever shows up, I just make sure we have, rhythm section that's there, and then whatever horn players show up. And it's, there's always been a good crew of people. And, just, again, giving kids opportunities to play and to come out and improvise. And then our top ensemble also rehearses during the summer. We like to sight read, and there are about 40 tunes in our folder already for this coming year, things that we've read and are looking at on the playlist already. So it makes the starting of the year easier. We're actually gonna next Wednesday we'll be meeting with the second band, which is called the Jazz Ensemble. With the jazz orchestra, we'll get together with them and we will sight read together their music for the upcoming year. And then, so they'll be hitting the ground, running when they come in. They'll have their music. We already looked at some of the stuff, and we'll start that way. And then the other big thing that we do, which I think has been really instrumental in keeping things going as far as a program, we started this thing called the Rock River Jazz Camp. And I have to give credit to my daughter and a couple of her classmates. Back in 2016, I think, is when she approached me. She's a bass player, and she said, I really think we should start a jazz camp here. And my initial reaction was like, man, it costs lots of money to start a jazz camp. We have to hire, teachers. We have to bring in staff. They're not going to work for free. And she said, well, if that's the case, then why can't we be the teachers? And this was for middle school students. I should have said that up front, a middle school jazz camp. And so I thought about that. I was like, you guys are really great players, and it would be a way to give back to the community in the district. They've been very supportive of our program, and what a great opportunity to teach and, pass along, the program to the people coming up, and share with them what you know. And so 2018 was our first, what we call the Rock River Jazz Camp. We're right on the Rock River here. And I thought we'd have maybe a couple combos or something, kids that show up. And first year we had, I think 40 students or something. And next year, I think we had a little more than that. And then I think, COVID hit then, so we weren't able to do it. Came back again last year and had two bands again. And then this summer, we were all the way up to like, I think 78 students. We had to go to 3 bands.
Wow.
And I had to bring back alumni to help. And I had to have Carly came back with a couple of college friends. She's a music ed major now. So, and it's really cool to see these students getting up in front of a band and, doing the sectionals, and they're doing master classes and teaching improv. And, we have to train them a little bit up front. We have to go through a couple mock rehearsals. How would you rehearse this? How would you rehearse that? What are you going to talk about in master class? They already know how to run sectionals, because that's a big part of our program. But, what are you going to do for an improv class? But it's just great to see. I mean, our current saxophone section right now was one of the first saxophone sections that go through our camp in 2018. They're now sitting in the top band. So
and the high school kids who are doing the mentoring, I mean, they're getting better too, right?
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, when you have to teach something, you got to really assess how you do it and how to get somebody else to do it and all that. Man, what a great system. I want to kind of transition into the Essentially Ellington Festival. So I guess the first question I'm going to ask you is, for people who don't know what it is, what is Essentially Ellington?
Essentially Ellington is a festival that was started, it's going to be the 25th year this year, by Wynton Marsalis and Jazz Ellington Center. And the whole idea was to make available the music of Duke Ellington. I can attest to the fact that while in college, I did not play a lot of Duke's music. And coming out of college, I did not really know very much about him, other than, the superficial stuff. I think I might have played, Harlem Air Shaft, maybe Take the A Train. I think we might have looked at the menu. I know Crescendo and Blue had never performed it. I mean, that's I think literally that is it. I mean, it's a lot of bassy, but we didn't do much more than that. And this was like, late 80s, early 90s, along with they add another composer every year to in addition to Duke's music. So there's 8 charts that are published that are free. So all you have to do is sign up, and they send them to you. And this has been going on for 25 years. And if you want, you can record any of the charts, send them in for comments only, or as part of the competition. And then the recordings for those are due like the end of January. And then they'll select 15 finalists from 5 regions from across the United States to come to New York City in May to play as part of a festival and competition.
So for band directors who have not done it before, what's the value in it? What do your kids get out of it?
I mean, there's just so much. First of all, I'm just to start by saying that Duke's music alone is a reason just to order the music and to study it and play it. As far as getting something out of it, I first and foremost, it's just playing his music. It's got a sound that is unique, and students, even though it's old, I mean, his music is timeless. And there's something, I don't know if addictive is the right word to it, but it's got something. It just gives you a certain vibe when you play it, and a feeling that you just don't get from other composers. So the music itself. Beyond that, it's challenging. And I mean, Duke wrote for some of the greatest jazz musicians in the world he had in his band. And he wrote for individuals. I mean, Johnny Hodges playing alto, lead alto. Some of the ballads that are in the library are just, beautiful. Lawrence Brown playing trombone. I mean, there's some very challenging trombone parts. Cootie Williams playing, lead trumpet. You've got to have a clarinet player in the section, in the saxophones. And so initially you're like, well, how am I supposed to get a high school kid to play this stuff? And you know what? My first 8 years at Beloit, I was like, well, that's, I always got the music, but I looked at it and like, wow, blues in D. What the heck? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this isn't. I don't know. I mean, this trombone part goes up to C up on the treble,
Yep.
like third space treble.
So how did you get into it for the first time? How'd you take
Well,
that step?
I was convinced by another band director from the state here, Steve Spium, who's from Sun Prairie, who's been there many times. He heard our band at a festival and said, your band really should be doing this. And I was like, yeah, but the music is really, well, let me send you some stuff and check out the library and, just send something in for comments. So in 2008, we did. And then 2009, we just decided to do it and we made it. And then once you go, it's like, it just becomes like, this is what we got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because the actual experience of going and then meeting, the members of the band, they send out a clinician. And these guys have all become great resources for us and friends and mentors. And, we've had, Marcus Printup and Kenny Rampton and Victor Goines and even Jeff Hamilton, they've all been at our school and met the students and worked with them and me. And the students have made really great connections too with other students. And they still talk about, the friends they've met from other schools, and the directors I've met from other bands, and the resources and connections and just the talking like we're doing right now. I mean, I just had a video conference with Aaron Bush a couple weeks ago for a couple hours. We're just talking about the different things that we do. So we, one of the craziest things that happened because of Essentially Ellington, they put up our videos on YouTube, and we had back in 2015, I had a email from a wedding event planner from California contact me and said my client would like you guys to play for their wedding in San Francisco. And I didn't believe it. First, I didn't think it was real. And so I went to our principal and she's like, yeah, follow up, see what it is. And so we did. And I can't tell you who it was because there's a non-disclosure agreement that I had to sign. But they flew us out there to play at their wedding. And they're huge jazz supporters. They played in their high school jazz bands. And here we are out in San Francisco playing for a wedding. And it's because they saw one of our videos from Essentially Ellington. So
great.
It's, to say it's been life-changing, it's an understatement. So
that's great. So more people should do it. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, to start with, like I said, Duke's music is the first and foremost reason that you need to just get the music and at least try a couple tunes with your bands. Even though the difficulty, I was going to go back to this, I didn't ever think I'd have a trombone player that could play, Lawrence Brown's like Blue Cellophane, the incredibly hard solo piece feature. But not only I've had one, but two people actually have played that on the Jazz Unconsidered stage. I don't know how they learned it, but they did. I have clarinet players that, just pick up the clarinet from the saxophone section and learn to play this stuff. Just trust kids. They will do it. Now you have to sometimes provide resources. Maybe they'll need a private teacher. Maybe they'll need a YouTube video to learn how to do this or that, or a book or something. Maybe you need to sit down with them initially, but they are inspired by this music. It's they can do it.
And giving them something to strive for is really where it's at.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to listen to two examples of some of this great Ellington music. First one is Across the Track Blues. Chris, go ahead. What are we looking at here?
One of his blueses. He wrote lots of blues, and this one is in the key of D. And what I like about this is listening to all the different inflections and nuances that the players use, and it's a good way for students to hear the different ways that these players, jazz musicians, emote emotion. It's also a good way to listen to the rhythm section because they're basically just going to be playing quarter notes. And across the track blues, Ellington's referring to a train. He loved using the train analogy in lots of his pieces, and this is just one of those. And it's and also it has, I think, when we get to the saxophone solely with clarinet lead, that has what I think the Duke Ellington sound. So when I talk about that, it's in this piece and it's during that section. So I think if we listen to those things, clarinet solo here at the beginning, with the vibrato and the trumpet solo with a plunger, all those different effects that he's using. Those are different things we'll listen for while we do that. So there's a little taste of that chart. Now, one thing you can do with this, obviously, is you can certainly open up the solo section. You don't have to play it just as is. If you were going to perform this in at a concert or at a gig or something, you can certainly open up the solo sections. There's one chorus per soloist at this point. But I don't know if you noticed the rhythm section kind of have like that, like a locomotive kind of chugging effect. Like a train, just playing quarter notes. The bass was playing the quarter notes with space in between them. Drummers using brushes. The piano was pretty much out after the intro, which was interesting. It doesn't mean you have to have the piano lay out.
I found there's a lot of Ellington charts where that happens, where there's a big intro that he would play and then he kind of lets the band go for a while. I also noticed as we were listening to this how valuable the listening component is, because when you hear it and you see it, it doesn't compute. I mean, if kids tried to play this without listening to the recording and trying to copy it in some way, you wouldn't even get in the ballpark.
Right. And there you just kind of hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, the whole process of learning this music comes down to listening. We have a perfect resource here in Ellington's music and the music that Jazz Ellington Center is providing here as it's all right here. I mean, should you play the written solos? Initially, yeah, I think you should. You should learn to play them exactly because there's so many things you can learn from them. I mean, just getting it to sound the way that, are you putting all the scoops in there, the bends, the falls, the vibrato, do you always then play it that way? No, then you should try to learn something that sounds like that. Yeah, it's a great resource.
And the second one we're going to listen to is I Let a Song Go Out of My Heart. And we're gonna study the shout chorus of this one. Yeah,
and before we do that, just a little bit on this song, 1938, a piece that initially Ellington didn't like, and matter of fact, he kind of put it aside and didn't record it, and then brought it back out, and ironically, records it and becomes one of his greatest hits. So
interesting.
Good thing he did, and that's one of the other things about Ellington's music is there's a lot of backstories and history and just the fact that he traveled the world, played 20,000 concerts in Europe, Asia, Latin America, along with all the things he did in the United States. I mean, a lot of his music is tied to his experiences and events that he did throughout his life. So there's always something interesting about the pieces. It's not just, well, he just wrote this piece for the sake of writing a piece. We're going to look at letter D here, starting with the Barry solo. And again, now this is a Jazz at Lincoln Center's recording, which I also like to use after we listen to the Ellington version. We usually listen to Jazz at Lincoln Center or other people's recordings if we can find them. But let's listen to, starting at letter D, hear a really great Barry sound here, and then a response, call and response between that and the alto. And then, of course, you got some brass and plungers doing a rhythmic accompaniment there. And then what we're going to really look at is the shout chorus at letter E. Well, let's listen to it first, and then we'll talk about it. So what I'd like to point out about Ellington and his shout choruses. So as you can see in the score here, he uses 4 different voices, and it's not what you would think, typically maybe voice 1 would be alto 1, voice would be trumpet 1 and trombone 1. But rather, in this case, voice 1, the lead voice, is trumpet 1, but then it's doubled by Barry and trombone 2, which is, an interesting choice there. Voice 2, alto 1, and trumpet 2. And then voice 3 is alto 2, trumpet 3, and trombone 3. And then voice 4 is tenor and trombone 1. So the way that I like rehearsing a section like this is to have first the lead player being the trumpet 1 in this case, and a lot of times it's that is the case. We'll have him or her play the first phrase, first 4 measures, and after we listen to the recording, say, okay, let's try to play this and get all the inflections and all the different things you hear in that recording as best as you can. And I might give the recording ahead of time so that he's prepared to do that, and then we'll get the rest of his group 1, to do the same thing. And if we had a lot of time, I might even send them off in a sectional by group and have them work on this together just to get the notes and stuff down. But then the idea is to loop this section, just these 4 bars, and the rhythm section is going to do a loop. So they're going to play 4 bars and then repeat, 4 bars and repeat. And so they can work on, while they're working on time and locking in, we're going to have group 1 play, and then group 2 is going to play, and then group 3 is going to play, and then group 4 is going to play, all separately. And what they're trying to do is to match everything that the lead trumpet player is doing. So however he plays it, he or she plays it, the rest of the groups are trying to do that as well. So it's not like because you play second trumpet or third trombone, your part is not important. We're trying to match exactly what the lead player is doing, everything.
That's a great way to do that. That loop is genius.
Yeah, and it's not my idea actually. This is something I stole from Steve Spiam, Sunbury, and I'm sure other people have figured this out. But it's it is genius, and I saw Steve do it at a convention, I believe, is where I first saw him do it. But yeah, and Ellington's music is, his shout courses are full of these little shout sections like this. And they're never the same grouping. So you always have to do, a little bit of homework first before you go to the rehearsal and figure out who's with who. Yeah, it's very effective. And then of course, what's neat is when you do them all separately, and then the first time you have the students all when you put it all together, they're just like, wow, this is amazing, because it doesn't sound very good by itself, other than the lead part. But when they first hear it all together, they're like, dang, did we really sound like that? I mean, that's good. So, and then you just work on the next one after that.
All right. I love some good score study. Can we just finish up? Chris, I like to ask a lot of our guests, as a seasoned teacher, what is some advice that you have for young, either people coming into the music education field who are in college, or people who are in their first job and looking for some guidance?
Yeah, it's always a great question. So I would say, and I've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but don't forget, why we got into loving music in the first place. And that's probably because we were playing our horns. Keep playing. I think one of the best things I did about 5-6 years ago was started taking private lessons again. Started some jazz lessons with Mark Davis, a teacher in Milwaukee. Probably the best thing I did. I mean, just kind of reinvigorated everything as far as my music, and being excited about it again. And second, I've always had people ask me, well, how do you get all these clinicians? How do you get the resources? How do you get money for the things that you do? And my simple answer is just ask. A lot of times I think we're afraid to. And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to say no. But I reach out to a jazz musician. Hey, can you come in and work with us? Yeah, would love to. How do you fund some of the things in your program? I mean, I had to go in the community and find some people to help with that, and just have a conversation and sit down, maybe over dinner or lunch or something, and hey, this is what we're doing. This is what I need the money for. Can you help us out? And you'd be surprised. I mean, that's how we've done it.
Chris, thanks very much for being on. Appreciate it very much. I assume you're okay if people reach out to you, Facebook or other places, to get some more information.
Absolutely.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.